I signed up for the How to Price Bookkeeping Services class last spring. And I thought, well, if I just start making tiny little incremental changes, then we'll start seeing results. And I tried to make just like small improvements here or there. And I started to realize, no, if I'm going to do this, I really have to make the change across the board. So I started doing two things. The first thing I started looking at my client list and saying, who are the people that I really want to move forward with? There are lots of clients who are cost averse. They really, really don't want to pay a high price. They want to continue to see like those savings. There are clients that still have it locked in their head where they're going, we have to pay you an hourly rate. So there's a lot of client education there and figuring out who are the people that are going to be the right business owners to move forward. Who is my ideal client? The second thing I then did was I got rid of the people that weren't my ideal clients. So I'm only moving forward with clients that I really want to spend my time with and that I really want to work with. And I started monitoring the amount of time I was spending on every single client's file. So do an analysis of my own business and say, how much time am I actually putting into each of these individual clients on a monthly basis? And then being able to approach them and say, you know what, you've been with me for a year and a half. I haven't raised your prices at all during that time. We can show that your business has grown by X dollars, by X transactions over that time period. I think we need to update what we're working on in your file. And for your business to grow and to make that next step, this is what I think we should do. Every single client that I've approached with that conversation, the response has overwhelmingly been, yeah, sure, absolutely. And when I come back to them with a renewal contract and say, here are the packages that I'm offering right now, let's talk about these services. This is what you already have. And this is what you get in this new level. And here are your new prices. And time and again, the prices have gone up. And everyone is just saying, yeah, sure, that's fine. And I feel confident with that because I really want to continue having good service for those good clients. The people that are signing up are paying me 50% more than I would have priced before. It's helping me then have higher quality clients. I don't have to have as many clients, and that frees up the amount of time that I can spend on each client. That also frees up my schedule. So if I want to take a Friday off in the summer, I can, because my bills are still going to be paid. My firm is still making money.
I'm located in Southern Ontario in Niagara region. I've had my business for about 7.5 years. When I started my business, I was really challenged by, I had been working as a bookkeeper for a company, and they were changing all of their staff to subcontractors, and they dictated what my opening rate was going to be. They said, oh, we're going to pay you $25 an hour instead of the salary that you've been on. And that sort of, when I opened my business to be a subcontractor to them, that was my rate that got grandfathered into everybody. I had no network. I didn't know anybody. And of course, then I met you and heard about you and got into your program the first time and started working on things. And it's been a joyride ever since. So the challenge, of course, with the pricing was that I had allowed that former client to dictate what my price was going to be. And it's very difficult then to change that. And I wasn't saying no to anybody. I didn't have a niche. I was spreading myself really thin and not making very much money as a result of it. I was surviving and paying my bills, but I wasn't going on vacations. I wasn't buying the nice car that I like to drive. Like, I wasn't living life to the quality that I would have liked to. Yeah, I think it was my second year in business that I met you at a conference in Toronto. And I joined the Value Pricing Academy, and I made a commitment to myself to, I think I've attended probably 95% of the sessions live. I do the homework. I do the workbook. I created a Value Pricing Academy study group, as you know, with your permission, and those people hold me accountable. They're all always so thankful for our meetings and discussions. And I'm like, hey, I'm thankful for you guys because you're holding me accountable. Effective pricing. Wow. Mind-blowing software. I've used it 3 times. And honestly, sorry, I get excited. So these are my first times value pricing people now instead of doing hourly. The very first time I used it, I would have quoted this person $4,200 a year for the services that I provide to them. Using effective pricing, they chose my premium package, and their annual price was over $18,000. So that was huge. And that just got me, of course, really pumped up. The second time I used the software, my increase was almost 200%. I think it was about 194% or something. So the results that I've been getting with the software has been so significant for my business and confidence, everything. I mean, I get pumped up talking about it. I just need you to stay a bit longer. I just need you to can I be a burning motivation just a little while? A simple question, can I get closer? Just for
Hi, my name is Teresa Slack, and I am one of the owners of Financially Bookkeeping Solutions. Having the honor of working with Mark for the last 3 years, I have a lot of success stories and a lot of testimonials to share. So we're going to step back in time a little bit. I started Financially along with my sister 7 years ago. Things started to happen fast. We started growing quickly, and then we thought, okay, we're getting too busy. It's time to hire staff. We hired 3 team members, and we thought, yeah, we're good. We were not good. We were doing all kinds of things wrong. One of the big things we had wrong is we didn't understand how to price ourselves. We didn't understand how to value the work that we did. A lot of times I remember both Connie and I saying to ourselves, well, it doesn't take us that long to do it. We won't charge them more. And that was such a bad decision. Then about 3 years ago, I think it was, I met Mark at the first QuickBooks Connect conference, which was actually called QuickBooks Thrive. And we went to a session and we met this guy named Mark, and he did this. We went home. We created 3 packages. We put prices to it. We had entry, full, and premium bookkeeping, and the prices were set. And we thought, we've done this. We contacted each of our clients. We said, hey, this is how we're doing work now. And they were all like, awesome, that's great. Yeah. We were not doing value pricing. We were doing fixed pricing. And the big element that was still wrong is we had not learned to value the work that we do. Because of that, we almost put ourselves out of business. We were at some points, we were paying our staff more than we were bringing in revenue from a client. At that point, Connie and I had to make a decision. Are we going to make some changes to what we do, or are we going to pack it in and go get jobs? Obviously, because I'm here today, we chose to continue. We chose to invest in our business. And one of the first things we did was we signed up to join Mark's Value Price Academy, and we purchased his Cloud Pricing 2.0 software, which has now been replaced with effective pricing, which is even more spectacular. And within that first year, we turned things around. The key elements Mark taught us was how to understand and appreciate the value of what we do. And most importantly, being able to communicate that to a client so that they would appreciate what we're doing. They would value what we were doing, and they would understand, and they would willingly pay higher prices to have us support them. I remember one time, not too long, about 6 months in, Mark had taught us how to reprice our existing clients. We are good students. Connie and I went away, we did it. We repriced all of our clients. And within a 6-week period, we had increased our revenue by 25%. And on top of that, many of the clients actually purchased an average of 15% more. Like that, we turned things around, and we have never looked back. And I am so incredibly grateful for all of the training and the teaching that Mark has done. So that is my testimonial to the Value Price Academy and the effect that it can have on your business and your future.
Welcome to day 2. I was nearly caught out there. I was busy just checking something in the lobby. Anyway, we are going to be starting in 3 minutes. So let's see who's here so far. I think let me know where you're from. Let me know in the chat box where you're from. I think that the panel Q&A is wrapping up. So I think there's a lot of people in there, and they'll be coming across in the next 2 or 3 minutes. So who have we got here so far? Let me know in the chat box. Let me know as well what action you've taken since yesterday, if anything. And if you haven't, why not? What's stopping you? Or perhaps as you are planning to do something after the conference. Anyway, I can see Justin Wright is here. Hi there, Justin. He says howdy. Who else? A bit quiet in the chat box at the moment. Let me know you're here. I can see. Okay, great. We've kicked off. We've got. Is it? Do you pronounce that Teo or Theo? Teo, I'm going to guess, from sunny Southern California. I assume that is. So hi there. Michael is here. Michael McClellan is here from Texas, Fredericksburg. Lynn James from Abbotsford up in Canada. Well, I'm guessing it's cold right now. Angie is here from Nebraska. Welcome back to you, Angie. Laurie is here. And I think you were the first person to arrive when I was just getting set up. So great to see you. Ellen is here from Ohio. What was the best thing about yesterday? There was so many great things yesterday, and I don't know which of the breakout sessions you went to. I was giving technical support to Emily's session, which was really, the feedback was great at the end. And while I was doing that, I also had the lobby open, was checking in every now and then on Teresa's panel with her guests. And that was pretty awesome. Some amazing stuff there. I love the enthusiasm of Carol Kosterchuk. That was awesome. Who else is here? Have I not said hello to yet? Arnold Gilbo is here from Virginia. Hi there. Lots of people from the US here. We have Angela's here, again, from Austria. I seem to recall yesterday we had obviously a lot of people from the US, UK, Canada, usual places, but Austria was here. We had Austria, Germany, India, anybody from any different countries. I know some countries aren't here because Zoom events doesn't allow them in. South Africa, for example. So my South African friends, we sent them a link to a live stream. So if you are watching from the live stream, then feel free to comment and your comments should come through. I will see them. Okay, we are, I think, Anita's here. Hi there, Anita. Great to see you. We are going to be starting now. I make it on the hour. I can also see that the room's filling up very quickly now because the panel session's finished. Neil's here. Hi there, Neil. For those of you in the panel session, how was it? Let me know in the chat box. What did you learn from the panel session? What was the biggest insight from that panel session? I'm going to guess most people were in the panel session, but who else has just arrived? Vipul's here from, I think, Vipul, you're from India, I think. So we have India represented, Austria represented. Any other countries I've not mentioned so far, other than of course UK, US, Canada. Okay. Let's get started because we have loads to cover in this session. We're going to address a number of issues today, a number of challenges. Yesterday we start off. I shared with you the 10 biggest problems, challenges with pricing bookkeeping work, and we worked through 4 of those. Today we're going to pick off 3 more. We're going to look into the problem of pricing too low. We're going to look at uncertainty of scope. We're going to look at how to calculate a price. So we're going to spend really much of today is about the mechanics of how do we come up with a price that we can calculate with confidence that it will give us a profit without having to resort to hourly rates. Because yesterday, one of the things we looked at, one of the problems is the pricing based on the hour, and we have to change that. Of course, I did ask the question yesterday, I said there are 2 types of people, and I asked a rhetorical question: are you a note taker or an action taker? And so if you are an action taker and have done something since yesterday, put in the chat box, what have you done? If you've taken some action, what action have you taken so far? I don't get the chance to read all the comments in the chat box because it will go crazy fast, but I do read them all afterwards. My team will grab them. And please feel free to ask me questions. If you've got questions for me, use the Q&A box for questions. because I can tick them off. If you put a question in the webinar chat, I will probably miss it, or at least I'll miss it live in the session. I'll catch up with it later. If you do put it in the webinar chat, put those 2 capital Qs in front, so at least my team notices them. I said yesterday that there's a huge opportunity for us in the profession because most people are pricing way too low for bookkeeping services. In fact, it's the same with all accounting services, but bookkeeping particularly, way too low. The great news is when you get that confidence, when you learn the knowledge, when you get the systems in place, there is the opportunity to get much, much better results. And I was looking at the chat box from yesterday, and there were 2 particular comments that jumped out at me. One was Laurie, who's here. I've seen Laurie Denham, said, we started value-based pricing and was able to increase our value and revenue by 85%. I was so underpriced, it was embarrassing. So congratulations for that amazing result. And thank you for sharing it in the chat box yesterday, Laurie. And then Brian from the UK, Brian from Enfield, who's in my academy, says, charge double the usual fee for a tax return due to value pricing and offering choice. So congratulations, Brian, if you're still here today, on getting double your usual fee. That's awesome. And I share those 2 because they were in the chat box yesterday. I encourage people to share their successes because it inspires others. It inspires hearing the great stories. I'm hoping you were inspired yesterday with Teresa's story in her session. And if you then went to a breakout session and caught up with the 3 other panelists, there were some great stories there. And there's going to be more stories coming to inspire you. So very quickly, how's today going to unfold? So we're on day 2, Wednesday. It's the same pattern as yesterday. 3 45-minute sessions with all of us together. I'll be doing 2 of them. And then we have another amazing guest speaker, Kim Lafayette. If you were here for the countdown music, you might have seen a brief glimpse of Kim. So she'll be joining us later in about an hour from now. She's extraordinary. And then we have 3 breakout sessions. Kim's doing a breakout session, a panel with a couple of other amazing people that you can learn from. Or if you want to learn more about marketing, you can join Emily. Her session yesterday was incredible. The feedback was great. I was there because it was my job to give her technical support. So Emily was amazing. And I'll be doing a Q&A session. I'll tell you more about that later. On the subject of the guest speakers, as you probably know, Teresa's an amazing speaker and inspirational what she's done, what she's achieved in just a few years in a bookkeeping business. But I also noticed some other comments in the chat box yesterday where Kate York said, I love Jessica. She is so knowledgeable. Bianca Mueller said, Jessica is so great. And Kimmy, woohoo. Shalene said, wow, Kim, that's great. And Karen Wolf said, Neil Criddle is an inspiration. Well done to him. And you may have met Neil and Jessica if you were in the panel session earlier, but you will certainly be meeting all of those. Kim today, Jessica tomorrow, she's extraordinary, and also Neil's extraordinary. 3 great speakers still to come, and there's just some people just to confirm that who are here that will, if you've never met them, they are inspirational. Remember, as a thank you for being here, we have made a contribution on your behalf to a worthy cause to help women in Uganda with literacy and business training. So as you're learning today, you're also helping other people learn. Make sure you download your workbook. I'm sure you have. So I just remind you again quickly, if you haven't got it, ask in the comments and my team will give you the link to it. So we're going to focus in this session on how do we give a price. We're going to look at this challenge of scope and uncertainty and how do we come up with a price. They're the 2 things we really want to focus on. And we're going to build up towards a complete pricing system in this first session. But before I do that, let me just talk about briefly the concept of what I call the value pricing journey. You see, I've been teaching value pricing in the profession since the year 2000 now, so nearly 23 years. And when I first started, because I'd figured out value pricing in my own accounting firm in 1999, I started off by teaching people who back then were just pricing based on the hour to start value pricing. And people struggled because it's conceptually very difficult. Value pricing is not easy because value itself is subjective. As my friend Ron Baker says, you can't touch, feel, and measure it. It's in the hearts and minds of customers. So value is subjective. How do we come up with a price for something where you can't measure it? And so I realized over the years that you have to take things one step at a time. And we have to move away from hourly. We said that yesterday. Hourly is terrible. It's a terrible way to price. And the first thing we want to do, the first step of the journey, is to figure out how we can move from hourly billing to fixed pricing. So if you're currently pricing based on the hour, your first step is just to move to fixed pricing. Once you have moved to fixed pricing, the next thing you'll start to do is embrace this idea of packages, menu pricing, which we covered yesterday. And then you've got a great stepping stone to move to value pricing, which means implementing some other things like the power of preference questions and price psychology and many more things, that some of it which we'll touch on during these 3 days. And the point I want to make about this journey is that, and a big misconception, I've seen, and we saw in the benchmarking yesterday, that now almost as many people used fixed pricing for bookkeeping work as hourly, which is great. We're starting to see a real shift. But we also have to recognize that fixed pricing is not value pricing. A lot of people think there's a misconception that just because you've moved to flat fees or fixed pricing, you're value pricing. No, you're not. The way that we price, the way that in our profession we do fixed prices is still a form of cost plus pricing. It's still based on time. Because when I ask people, why have you come up with that number? Why have you quoted that price? The answer is always, well, based on my experience of this client and based on my best guess at how long the work will take, this is what the price is. In other words, we give a fixed price based on the guess at the best guess of the number of hours, or best guess at the costs, as opposed to hourly, which is let's wait till we finished it and then give a surprise bill. It's a better way of pricing because fixed pricing is fairer on the customer. We give them certainty right up front. It's also better for you as well because when you fix price, you can get the price conversation out of the way early. You can get paid in advance, which is great. With hourly billing, you can't, because until you've added up the hours at the end, you can't raise the invoice. You can't get paid. So fixed pricing is much, much better than hourly. But it's not value pricing. It's a form of cost plus pricing. But then once you move to menu pricing, once you've figured out how to give a fixed price, then you can work out how to give a fixed price for each of your different packages. And we're going to talk about that later on today. In my second session, we're going to talk about how we build with our pricing formula, our calculations from simple fixed pricing to menu pricing. Once you have started to move to menu pricing, you are now in the realms of value pricing. It's not pure value pricing, but you're starting to get there. I call the menu pricing the first step of value pricing, the first stage of value pricing. And it's getting towards value pricing because now by giving clients choice, clients get to choose the package based on their own individual perception of the value to them of each offering. And as I said, we'll talk later about how you come up with the price based on value for those different offerings. So that's going to be in the second session. But today we're going to focus on fixed pricing. And one of the things that we have to be aware of is that the bad news with value pricing, when we get to value pricing, remember it's subjective, you can't touch, feel and measure value, it's difficult, and everybody values things differently. And the problem with value pricing is there's no such thing as a formula for pricing. Value pricing is a feeling, it's a judgment, and that's why many people struggle with that. There's no such thing as a formula, a pricing formula for value pricing. But the good news is there is a formula for cost plus pricing. There is for hourly, the way we calculate charge out rates multiplied by hours, but also with fixed pricing. When we're fixed pricing, we can have a formula. And what I found is that from working with people, that generally moving from hourly to fixed pricing is the hardest step. But if you can figure out a formula for fixed pricing, you've got something that provides a really powerful foundation that you can then build on. You can build on by then taking that formula and start and then give different choices, different options, and then we can start to go beyond that as you move along the journey. So let's start off with, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how you create a formula. But we're going to start off with the first thing we have to think about is the challenge of scope, the uncertainty over scope. And I said to you yesterday when we looked at the 10 problems, the 10 challenges with bookkeeping, is one of them is it's complex. We're not selling cups of coffee. If we were selling cups of coffee for Starbucks, it's relatively easy to work out the cost of every cup of coffee that they sell. But bookkeeping, every client's different. Every client has different needs, different wants, different situations, different scope. You have big clients, small clients, clients with great records, clients with terrible records. They are all different, and they all have completely different requirements, scope requirements to get the work done. So how do we cope with that? Well, the starting point is we have to start to understand what are the most important scope factors. Scope factors are those things that have the biggest impact on the amount of work. And one of the things we did in the benchmarking study, and later on today, remember that report that I sell for $97. Later on today, we will, as a thank you for being here, we'll send you. We'll put a link later on to grab your copy of that research report. One of the things I asked in it, is I asked people, what are the top scope factors? What are the things that are most important? And I've put here the top 5 according to that benchmarking study. There are others as well in the survey. You'll see all of them when you get the research report. But the top 5, based on what people said, was number 1 is the number of transactions per month. The number of transactions. And that makes sense because the more transactions a client has, whether that's sales invoices, bank transactions and so on, the more transactions, the more data entry, and data entry is quite a big part of bookkeeping work. Second on the list was the number of bank accounts. And I suspect that's partly because we also have to then reconcile the bank accounts. The more bank accounts, the more reconciliations need to be done. A third factor is the number of credit card accounts. Another one was whether or not they're registered for sales tax. In the UK, that would be VAT. If you're not registered for VAT or sales tax, it's a lot simpler, the entries. And number 5 on the list was the accounting system that they are using. As I say, there are others as well, but they were the ones that were listed as the top 5. Now, whether you agree with that is entirely up to you. What I find is different people have different views on what is the most important. But your starting point of coming up with a formula is you need to figure out which is the single most important scope factor. I call it the primary scope factor. The primary scope factor is the thing that has the biggest impact on the amount of work required. And so number of transactions is what many people have. I've had other people have had it a little bit simpler, number of sales invoices per month on average. I've had some people have some completely different things, like the size of the business for bookkeeping. And it'd be interesting if anybody's got something different, you might want to put it in the chat box. What's your primary scope factor? And so the primary scope factor is the one thing that has the biggest impact on the amount of work, the biggest impact, therefore, on what the price should be. And then all the others are secondary scope factors, which do need to be considered. Okay, so that's your starting point to figure out what are the primary scope factors. So I'm going to share with you now a process that I did in my own accounting firm when I figured out value pricing in 1999. I came across value pricing. I realized I'd been time-based billing, and I had to find a way to at least give a price up front as part of that. And I'd been thinking about that for a while in 98, 99, trying to figure out how can I give people a price up front. Now, I didn't do bookkeeping. I was an accountant in practice. I did end of year financial statements. But the process was exactly the same. And so I went through a process, which I'm going to describe now, but this time in relation to bookkeeping services. So what I did is I picked a random sample of about a dozen clients, representative clients of my practice, and I recorded 2 pieces of information. What was the fee that I charged them, and what was the answer to the primary scope factor? For annual financial statements, it was different. It wasn't number of transactions. For annual financial statements, I did this analysis based upon the size of the business in terms of annual revenue, annual turnover, annual sales. Because I found with annual financial statements, So if you're an accountant here, you'll probably appreciate this. I found that the bigger the business, a million turnover business would take me more time than one that's doing 100,000. So anyway, bookkeeping, let's say it's the number of transactions. So what you would want to do is get, let's say, an Excel spreadsheet and pick, say, 10, 12 clients at random. I've creatively called these clients A through to J. These are not real numbers. Please do not think that what I'm going to give you is a formula that you can use. You have to do the analysis based on your practice. So you pick 10, 12 clients at random that are fairly representative of your firm, your client base. And then you record, firstly, the answer to the primary scope factor. That may well be, for example, the number of transactions per month. And the second piece of information you record is what is the annual fee? Or perhaps more accurately, what is the annual fee that you know you should charge? So it may be in some cases that you charge them $1,000 a month, $1,200 a year, and you know it should be $1,400. So what's the fee you know you should charge them to make money? You record those numbers, really simple. And then what you do is you do something called regression analysis, which basically means that you plot those on a graph. On the one axis, you have the annual fee. The other one, you have the prime scope factor. In this case, number of transactions. You plot them for that representative sample of clients. And then what you do is you create a line of best fit, which is essentially what regression analysis is. Now, this might start to sound complicated. The great news is Excel makes it really, really easy. Excel will do this for you. It'll work out what is the line of best fit. What is the line that best predicts the data? And what Excel will also do for you is give you some really interesting information, some statistics. And of the various statistics, the most useful one is what's called the R-squared number. R-squared is a number between 0 and 1. And R-squared simply means how well does the line predict the data? In other words, how close are all the points to that line? It's between 0 and 1. The closer to 1, the better. If you had a 1, that would mean every single point would be on the line. Very unlikely. But anything that's above 0.7 is a pretty good correlation. So you get that R-squared, which will tell you how well that line, how accurate how good that line is to predict the data. And the second thing that it tells you as well, and this is the really interesting thing, is it also gives you a formula for that line. It gives you a formula. And so you could use that formula to work out your price. All you do is take the formula, you plug in the primary scope factor, let's say the number of transactions per month, and it will tell you what the price that you should charge. Okay, I probably oversimplified it because you might be thinking, and quite rightly, let me just go back to that, if you were to look at that chart, you're probably thinking though, hang on Mark, a lot of those points are not actually anywhere near the line. In other words, if you take the formula, it's going to give you a price that will essentially fall on that line. But when you look at your clients, some of those points are a long way from the line. So for example, if you look at client H, if you've got great eyesight, I can just about see an H on there. With client H, it suggests that the price you charge is higher than if you drop down to where the line is. And so client H is a higher price than the line. Some of the points are below the line, which is suggesting that perhaps the formula give a price that's too high. So you might be thinking and concluding, understandably, that is not very accurate. And the answer to that is you are absolutely correct. It's not very accurate. It's not an exact science. But, and this is the important bit, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for 4 very important reasons. Reason number 1. The first one is the existing system that we have is not accurate. In other words, if you are pricing based on the hour, this is not an accurate system. We think it is because we've got this hourly rate, we multiply by the number of hours we spend. There's actually 3 parts of when we come up with a price using hourly billing. There are 3 components to it. Three numbers that we multiply together. And all three numbers are really a complete piece of fiction. So let's think about those three numbers. So we first of all take an hourly rate. So where does that hourly rate come from? Well, in the accounting profession, most firms, and I've done benchmarking studies many times over the years, most firms, particularly in the UK, will take chargeable salary costs and they'll multiply by a number typically between 3 and 4. It's usually 3.5. They take chargeable salary costs, multiply by 3.5. And the thinking behind that is that's because we then get the 3/3 model, which means that in theory what happens is your charge out rate is designed to cover a third of it your salary costs, give or take a bit, a third the overheads, and the third should be your profit. That's the theory. But why that? And I think that number is largely because of benchmarking. We tend to copy each other in the profession. Why is it that formula? It's just a formula that somebody's plucked out the air and thought that's a good formula. Which is even more crazy if you are a sole practitioner, if you are the owner of your firm, you probably don't have a salary. Yes, the people you employ do, but when I started my accounting firm back in 1996, I didn't know anything different. I thought I had to have an hourly rate. How did I pick my hourly rate? Because I wasn't earning a salary. I just plucked a number out of the air. It was a complete piece of fiction. And then we multiply that number by the number of hours that go on the timesheet. Now, I probably don't have to spend too long talking about how accurate that is. But I know that when I was growing up years ago in the accounting profession in a multi-partner firm, there were all sorts of things that went on with timesheets, and they were a complete work of fiction. When I was a junior working on large audits, for example, if you couldn't remember at the end of the week where you'd spent your time, you knew that you could dump them to the bigger audit clients because it would get lost there. And the smaller clients that you were responsible for, you try and put a bit less there because it makes your numbers look better. There was all sorts of crazy things that go on with timesheets. They are not accurate. So we take those two pieces of fiction, the number of hours by some random number that's our hourly rate, and then we multiply by one more number. And that is called the write-off rate or the recovery rate. When I've done benchmarking studies in the UK, the average accounting firm writes off 8%. The average recovery is 92%. But essentially what happens is, and if I think back to when I was a manager in an accounting firm, in the 1990s, you'd finish the job, you'd get ready to raise the invoice, you'd go and request the work in progress report, you'd see the work in progress and you'd say, oh my goodness, the client's never going to pay that. How much do I think I can get away with? And then we'd write something off, or sometimes write something on. In other words, we apply commercial judgment. And so the price that we end up with is completely made up, three made up numbers. Commercial judgment, number of hours, and hourly rates. So that's the first reason why giving a price up front with this formula, it's not accurate, but neither is the existing system. The second reason, and this one's more difficult to get your head around, perhaps to get your head around it. It was for me. And this one, it was Ron Baker taught me this one a few years back. He says the goal is to maximize the profit of the portfolio. Our goal is to maximize the profit of our firm, not individual clients. We're obsessed with timesheets to make sure every client is profitable. But really, the goal is to maximize the profit of our firm, isn't it? And he described it to me. We had a meeting in Texas a few years back, and he said it like this to me. He said, think about an investment portfolio. With your investments, you want to maximize the return on investment. And to maximize the return on investment, you have to diversify it because you want to reduce risk and maximize over long term the return. So you diversify. You have a mix of investments. You have some investments that aren't very sexy. Government bonds, they don't give you much return, but they're predictable. And at the other end of the spectrum, we might have cryptocurrency, for example, highly risky, but could make huge amounts. It's the same when we think of our client base. We're going to have some clients that are very steady and simple and so on, But some clients, perhaps the bigger ones where there's sometimes opportunities, if we invested more of our time, we might spot opportunities to add huge amounts of value. Not necessarily all the time, but we could spot ways to save them tax, improve cash flow, tax savings, help them to grow their profits, all sorts of things that if we were to invest some time in those clients, we could help make a big difference. So our goal is to maximize the profit. And if we think about that formula, if I go back to that formula for a second, I think I've got it here. If we use that formula across, if that was a portfolio of clients, if you charged all of those clients based on the formula, overall you'd make the same amount of money as the firm. It's just that some clients you would charge a bit more, some a bit less. So it's all about the profit of the firm. Okay, that one's sometimes hard to wrap your head around. It took me, as I say, a while for that to sink in. The next two, though, are really important. The third one is we've only looked at the primary scope factors. There are all sorts of other things that impact on the price. The secondary scope factors, how many bank accounts do they have? How many credit card accounts? Are they registered for sales tax? What accounting system are they on? We have to factor those in. So let me come on to that. And the fourth reason why it doesn't matter is the only reason that we are coming up with a formula to give a fixed price is because we really want to move to value pricing. And so this gives us a base price. It gives us what economists call a seller's reservation price. It's your minimum price that you never go below. You use it as a minimum. And then what you're going to do as you move on this journey, you'll start to implement other ideas. You'll start to use menu pricing, for example. And so later on, I'm going to share with you how you apply this and build this into your different options. Because remember, I said to you that when you do menu pricing, if you do it right, most people will choose the middle option, not the cheapest one. So we're just establishing a base price, a starting point that we can use, that you can then build on as you then start to do the other things with value pricing. So when you're doing this exercise, so let me just summarize. You want to identify what are the scope factors, what's the primary scope factor, and what are the secondary scope factors for bookkeeping work. I've given you a few of them. You'll see more in the research report. Then you carry out your regression analysis to come up with a formula. But once you've got that formula, you then need to look at the secondary scope factors. And let me explain the way that you do it by showing a resource that when you join the academy, one of the things we do in the training in, I think, month 2, we go much deeper on this topic. And one of the resources I have for academy members is an Excel model that makes this really easy. You could do it yourself. Excel will do it. You could figure it out yourself. But if you are, when you join the academy, I have an Excel model that does it for you. 5 steps. Step number 1 is where you think about what are the possible primary scope factors, what are the secondary scope factors. And I encourage you to think of, if you're not sure what the primary scope factor is, come up with 3 or 4. And the reason for that is because in step 2, you'll start to look at what is the best of the primary scope factors. Is it the total number of transactions? Is it the number of sales invoices? Is it the number of bank transactions? Is it something completely different? So in step 2, what you would then do is pick out a random sample of clients and record the numbers for them, the primary scope factors and the annual fee. But you'll do this for every primary scope factor. Because then what the spreadsheet does is it works out and does all the formulas and the regression analysis for each of your possible primary scope factors. In other words, you can then see which one's got the best R-squared, and that'll help you to determine what is the best primary scope factor, which is the one that's the best predictor of what the price should be based on your client base. Then in step 3, what it will then do for you, and you can do this yourself if you want, it will then tell you which clients are the outliers, which ones are the furthest away from that line where the price you charge is furthest away from what the formula suggests. And in the table below, it highlights in red those that statistically are quite a long way from the line. And this is where you do a little bit of analysis based on your knowledge of those clients. You look at the clients that are furthest away from the line, and you ask yourself the question, well, what's the possible reason? Why do I charge that client more than what the formula suggests? Or why less? And it may be because they have lots of bank accounts. It may be because they're in a particular industry that's more complex. So industry is a secondary scope factor. It may be that you charge less for them because they're not registered for sales tax. So it's easier. So start to think about, for each of the clients furthest away, what's the reason why the price does need to be higher or lower? What are the secondary scope factors that apply to this particular client? And based on that, you can start to use your judgment as to how much would you need to increase or reduce the price by based on those particular factors. So, for example, you might find that if they're on a desktop accounting system and you're a QBO Pro advisor and you hate desktops because it creates more work, you might look at your clients and know that those on desktops, you have to charge them 35% more because it's a difficult system to use. For example, you do the analysis. And then in step 4, what you can then do is for each of your clients is look at which of those secondary scope factors apply. Are they on desktop systems? Is that client in a particular industry? Does that client have multiple bank accounts, whatever it might well be? And together with your judgment as to where the price has to go up or down, and it will then recompute the regression analysis and the R squared, taking into account the secondary scope factors. And what you should find by that point is that you're now getting an R squared that you're comfortable with. It's 0.7 upwards. You still will never get all the points on the line, but you'll get something closer. And then what you can then do is you've then got a formula. You can use Excel to crunch the numbers, and if you want to price a client, you just simply put in what is the primary scope factor number, which could be how many transactions per month, and then you identify and tick, putting a Y in the yellow boxes, for all the secondary scope factors that apply to that client. They have multiple bank accounts. Are they on desktop systems? It'll do those adjustments for you, and it will give you a fixed price. So you could do that yourself. If you join the Academy, you'll get that Excel spreadsheet together with complete explanations of how to use it. Okay, so I said to you, let's go back to here. So where are we? So the first step of your journey is to move from hourly to fixed pricing. And this is arguably the hardest step. Once you've got a process, a system, a formula for giving a fixed price with confidence, moving to value pricing then becomes a lot easier. A lot easier. So later on, I'm going to talk about, once you've got a methodology to come up with a base price, how do we then come up with the price for our 3 packages, our bronze, silver, gold? What do you do there? We're going to come on to that later. But what I want to do next is I just want to talk about a few other things that you can consider when you are value pricing. And we're going to talk about a system. We're going to talk about a system that many people in the Academy use, which is a pricing system. So you can price with confidence. We talked about confidence yesterday, and we said yesterday that when it comes to confidence, the 3 things are, you need to have the knowledge of how to price. Like, for example, you now know to give 3 options. Some of you said yesterday, I've never given 3 options before. I've seen it, but never done it. Well, now you know. It'll help you so much. It'll give you more confidence, because I said to you yesterday, one of the things about menu pricing is the conversation subtly changes from will they buy yes or no to which one will they buy when you give choice. So just having knowledge, pricing knowledge, will help you with confidence. The big one, of course, is believing that you're worth it. But the other one was systems, having a system. And we need a pricing system for coming up with the price, because as we've just seen, pricing bookkeeping is complex. There's a lot of things to take into account. And so the best way to price with a client is to price face-to-face. I include Zoom meetings in that. You need to talk to clients if you want to get the best price. And the question then is, well, how do you, let's say it's a brand new client, you've never met them before, you have a meeting with a client and you've built up the value, and now it's come to giving a price. How do you give them a price? when there's so many factors, so many scope factors? Well, this is where you need a system. And a great system to use is one called effective pricing, which I'm going to show you now. I'm just going to first just re-log in again, just in case it's logged me out. Okay, so let me move on to this and just show you how some firms are pricing. I can see lots of questions coming in, by the way. I will get to the questions, if not before this session finishes, certainly in the next session. So I will be getting to questions. So the idea is, what you do is, once you've got a client that wants to buy from you, and tomorrow I'm going to kind of go through the whole process, the conversation process. We'll look at communicating value tomorrow, and it'll all come together tomorrow. But once you get to the stage when a client wants to buy your bookkeeping, and it's now just a case of agreeing the price, then what we do, let's go with Maggie Stevens has got a business. What we do is we sit down in front of the client, and we open up our pricing system. Could be a laptop. You could do it through Zoom, just like I'm doing it right now. And then what we do, before we can give a price, we have to ask a series of questions. Some of those questions are the scope questions. We need to understand the scope of the work. So we might want to ask, for example, how many transactions per month do they have? Let's say Maggie's got somewhere around about 100 transactions a month. We might want to know what industry Maggie's in. I'll leave it as bars, cafes and restaurants. We might want to know if she's registered for sales tax. Yes, she is. Does she operate a sales ledger, or is it a cash business? It's a cash business. How many bank accounts? And so we can ask the scope questions, the primary scope question and the secondary one. And behind the scenes are formulas calculating a price. Let me just hit save and continue because I'm just sharing some principles. Now, they are scope questions. But when we value pricing, I said yesterday, we have to give people choice. People love choice. And one way we can give choice is by giving 3 packages, menu pricing. But we can go beyond that. We can have preference questions. So you might, for example, say, Maggie, would you like us to also do bill pay for you? Now, this might not translate in the UK, so let me just describe. It's common in the US, where as part of bookkeeping, you may also raise the sales invoices for the client to make their life easier, and you may pay on their behalf their suppliers. And there's there's an app called Bill Pay, for example, that does exactly that. So Maggie and I said, yes, please do that. That would be really powerful. That would save me so much time if you could. I hate doing all that work. If you could do that, that would be great. Now, that's a preference question. That's where you're giving the client a choice of whether they want something else. And preference questions are really powerful. You'll see why in a second. Because you might also say to the client, do you want the bookkeeping done monthly or weekly? Let me tell you the advantage of it being weekly. If you have it done weekly, the more frequently, the more up to date it is, the more accurate your records are at any point in time. The client might say, wow, yes, I've always had it done monthly in the past, but weekly would be amazing. Yes, please, can I have weekly? These are preference questions. As you ask preference questions, when people say, yes, that would be great, I would love to have that, they are telling you, I value that. I value that. And so if they value something, we can charge them higher prices, as you will see. We might offer to scan their records. We might offer to work at their premises, for example. We might offer to have a quarterly meeting with them, but they might want it monthly, and so on. So we give them some choices, some options. And then once we've done that, we've asked the scope questions and the preference questions. Now we can explain to Maggie, and we have 3 options. Let me explain the different options. Which one would you like? And the client might say, the premium one sounds great. This is what we talked about yesterday, giving the bronze, silver, gold, the premium. The client says, I want the premium. Okay, at this point now, you are ready to reveal the price. And when you reveal the price, in this case, it's 1,073. I've taken the currency symbols off. You can put those in. It's 1,073 a month, 12 payments of 1,073. Only one of 2 things can happen. Either the client says yes or no. If they say, yes, I'm happy with that, then you're probably delighted because you've made a sale and probably at a high price because you have hopefully built in high prices here. But if the client says no, if they say no, that's a good thing. Because what you want to do is I think I said this yesterday with optimal pricing. You want to make sure that your first price is too high. Now, I know this is something that scares us. When we give a price, we don't like a negative reaction. We want people to say yes. We don't like it when they say that's expensive. But if they say yes to your first price, that tells you you're too cheap. They would have probably paid you more. So we want to come up with a price that's too high. Because if they say that's too expensive, we can change the package. And that's exactly what the preference questions are then for. If Maggie says, I can't afford $1,073 a month, what you do is you simply go back and you change something. And it may be we go back and say, well, why don't we not do the bill pay? If you can carry on with that, that'll make it cheaper. Would you like to see how much cheaper that will be? Yes, please. If we don't do that, it's just 942. By the way, all the numbers you can set up yourself. These are illustrations. Now, at this point, what happens is that first number they saw creates what's called an anchor. And any price you now reveal after that that's going to be a lower price will seem a much better price in comparison, even though that may have been way too high before. She may say yes. But if it's still too high, it's not a problem. We might change something else. We might say, well, it's a lower price if we do the bookkeeping monthly rather than weekly. Let's show you how much that would be. If we do that, it's only $825 a month. Oh, that's much better. Yes, please, I'll have that. But if she says no, you can just keep going. You just keep bringing the price down one little bit at a time by changing the package, working with the client until you find a combination of things that work for the client. So we could take all these yeses and turn them nos. You should do it one step at a time, but I'm just going to hurry up the process for now. And so this is now 497. If 497 is too high, there's always the cheap level, the cheaper package at 331. And then there's some more things we can do in the software to work with the client. Essentially, we start off with a high price, and then we work with the client and change the package one step at a time until they say yes. And the price point that you arrive at is almost certainly going to be every time a higher price than what you would have gone with your old system. So that's called effective pricing, and that's what a lot of firms in the academy use to get higher prices. In fact, if I could just share this story quickly, Sarah got an email from, I think Doreen's here. I think I saw her yesterday. Doreen sent an email to Sarah because she wanted some help and then said, thank you so much for your help. I'm so excited to finally be using this program. I was able to get a 32% increase the very first time I used it to renew and upsell a current client. That's with the software. That story I shared yesterday with Kim, and you'll meet Kim in a few minutes. Kim said she got a 154% higher price using that process. And that was 902% higher. That's higher than what she would have charged, 902% more than what her old bookkeeper was charging. Okay, we are going to a break very soon. I'm going to just leave. I'm going to leave it open for a bit just so my team can grab the Q&A because I will answer those questions later on. So don't worry, questions will be answered either today or I have a lot of tomorrow morning session. Tomorrow's first session, I've got about 10, 15, 20 minutes planned to answer questions. So your questions will get answered, I promise you. My team will make a note of those. But what would be also interesting, if I could just ask, is if you have used effective pricing, what's been the benefits to you? Put that in the chat box. What's been the benefits of effective pricing to you? For those of you that do use it, I know some do. I'd be interested. I will be grabbing later on and reading all the chat box comments. Okay, we are about to go to a break. As I did yesterday, I'm going to play out with some music for 60 seconds just to give me a chance to read a few comments and also for you to finish off putting anything you want into the chat box. Then you can go and have a break, whatever you want to do, grab a refreshment break, bathroom break, whatever. We start again in 14 minutes. And we start with the amazing Kim Lafayette. You're going to love her session. She's going to share from A to Z her entire pricing process. So it's going to, I think, build on a lot on what we've talked about today, but from a really practical point of view with somebody who's doing that. So make sure you come back for Kim's session in 14 minutes. And I will see you again an hour after that when we start to get into how do we then start to price our menu pricing? And I'm also going to share some other really powerful things to take your pricing to another level. and answer some of these amazing questions that are coming through. So I will see you in about an hour and a quarter, but come back for Kim in 14 minutes. See you soon. I've been waiting all my life for someone like you, like you.